Hello and welcome to the Moving Pathways Forward podcast series. Your host for today's podcast is Judith Allen Press, Principal Scientist at Apt Associates and Director of Technical Assistance for the Moving Pathways Forward project. Our featured guest today is Dr. Mary Alice McCarthy, Senior Policy Analyst at New America. Dr. McCarthy will discuss federal policy affecting career pathways programs, such as the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, the Ability to Benefit provision, and the Higher Education Act. She'll also recommend areas for policy development around employer engagement and improving our understanding of credentials and their value in the labor market.
Mary Alice, it's a pleasure to have you here this afternoon. We're going to begin our discussion talking about the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act. As you know, it has a significant focus on the development of career pathways, and I'd like you to talk about key aspects of this legislation that will facilitate career pathway services for low-skilled adults and their development of career paths.
Great, thanks, Judy, and it's great to be here. It's true, the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act has a strong emphasis on career pathways and does provide states and local areas a lot of opportunities to build them. Career pathways are all about connecting services and programs that often exist in silos. And what this law does, and you can very clearly see that Congress's intent was to sort of push this process of bringing these programs together, different programs, coordinating the service delivery, and sort of creating opportunities for these different programs to leverage each other's resources. So the law now requires that the public workforce system, the adult education system, and the voc rehab system sit down together and hammer out a unified plan and submit that plan to the federal government. It also encourages them to work with their local TANF systems, the Perkins systems, and other systems that are also dedicated to sort of putting people onto pathways to education and to good jobs, to also coordinate their efforts with them. It's it reflects an understanding that to really help connect people and jobs and opportunity, you're going to need to leverage a lot of different resources. No one system can do it on its own. I think we've known that for some time. Another important piece, though, so I just want to say, this unified planning process is a real chance for states to be more strategic in how they use the resources that they get through the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act. It's also going to be a great thing for local providers, or it can be a great thing for local providers, because now they're going to have a common playbook that they can all look to. So if you're a local adult education provider, for example, and you sort of need to work with your local one-stop provider, and you now can point to the same document to understand how it is you're supposed to work together, what kind of resources you're going to leverage from one another, what type of relationships you're supposed to have, and what your common and shared goals are. And I think that that's going to make coordination at the local level a whole lot easier, because everybody's, again, as I said, reading from the same playbook. Another important change to the law, it's a little bit more, so that's a very sort of big picture that's going to allow for more strategic use of resources. At a very specific level, too, the law makes it easier for states and local providers to create these integrated education and training models. Under the previous law, it was very complicated, how you could use your adult education funds and what they could pay for, and paying for the occupational part of a combined program. That has all been sort of facilitated now. The new law enables providers to sort of connect resources that are delivered through Title I and Title II to create these programs like integrated education, like the IBES model, that we actually know work very well for folks. So again, that's another way that the law very explicitly is trying to help the development of career pathways.
Mary Alice, that was quite a comprehensive review of the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act. Let's move along and talk about some other legislative or policy initiatives that have implications for the development of career pathways systems.
Sure, and there are others, and one that I work on a lot is, of course, the Higher Education Act. Higher education is sort of at the heart of career pathways, because we're working to get people into post-secondary education and get them post-secondary credentials with value in the labor market, and that means bumping up against a lot of the policies around federal student aid And sometimes these can be hard to sort of square with some of the things that are going on in a career pathways framework. So I think there's some real opportunities, though, more and more to bring higher education closer to the career pathways movement. And I think there's a growing understanding on the Hill of the opportunities of what career pathways are and how the Higher Education Act and the federal student aid programs can support them. For example, as we all know, the Congress just recently reinstated the ability to benefit provision that allows students who do not have a high school credential to still qualify for a Pell Grant if they're engaged in what is called a career pathway program. And these are programs that integrate basic skills with occupational training and allows them to earn that high school equivalency while they're also earning college credit. The reason that was restored in large part is because of another feature of the Higher Education Act that I also think is important for the Career Pathways movement to know and present some opportunities. And it's called the Experimental Sites Initiative. Under the Higher Education Act, the federal government has the authority to waive certain restrictions on access to federal student aid if an institution is participating in a Department of Education sort of recognized experiment, okay? And the experiment is designed to see whether or not waiving certain rules and regulations actually helps students complete their post-secondary program and be successful. So ability to benefit was actually something that was tested through an experimental sites program, and it was found to be an effective way of students who participated in these kinds of integrated programs and didn't have to first get their GED before they could get their Pell Grant were more likely to go on to earn that post-secondary credential. So when Congress rescinded the ability to benefit, it was very problematic for so many institutions that were delivering these integrated programs. But I think what these institutions and the many stakeholders who supported them were able to point to that evidence from the experimental site to say, this is a strategy that works. We have evidence that it works. The Department of Education has evidence that it works because it conducted these experiments, and that was crucial in getting the ability to benefit restored, which it was just recently. So that experiment has already happened, but we can see the tremendous value of that. There are some other experiments currently going on that I also think have implications for career pathways that the career pathways movement should really be taking note of. One is one that was announced last year that waives the restriction or the prohibition on using Pell Grants for prior learning assessment. Now that experiment, was announced last year. There are 40 institutions that have been the department has allowed into the experiment, and the experiments haven't started yet. The department is in the process of developing the guidance and the agreements with the institutions to do that. But that's going to be very important. Prior learning assessment is really important for dislocated workers, for veterans, for providing those on-ramps for folks who already have a lot of work experience and potentially some college credit and sort of accelerating their pathway to a post-secondary credential. And just 2 days ago, the department announced another experiment, and this would be waiving the restriction or the prohibition against Pell Grants for prisoners. And so over the next few weeks and months, we're waiting for more information from the department. But some institutions will be able to apply to the department for the opportunity to deliver programs to prisoners who will then be eligible for Pell and can pay for the program through Pell, and the experiment will test whether or not, what sort of outcomes that generates for these prisoners. And I think what's really exciting is, what kind of outcomes it will develop in terms of their likelihood, recidivism rates, and just their post-prison outcomes. So it's really exciting, and I would encourage everyone to pay attention to those.
Thanks, Mary Alice. That's really interesting information, and we'll be look forward to following its progression. Mary Alice, as a final question, why don't you tell us a little bit about new policy initiatives that are needed to propel career pathways for low-skilled adults?
Sure, and I'm going to focus on sort of two areas. One is on we need to find ways to sort of pull employers more into career pathways and into the career pathways development. And the second is that we need to find ways to sort of improve our understanding of what different credentials like certificates and certifications and license, we need a better way to understand which ones have value in the labor market, what they're worth, and sort of what's behind them. So let me start with the first one, which is on the employer piece. There's the employer engagement is always, I feel like, one of the hardest things in career pathways, and making the case to employers for why they should be really involved in a hands-on way in the education and training of their workers. It can be hard to sell, particularly for their low-skilled workers. But we also know from the PIAC data, that we have a very large low-skilled population, 36 million adults, and we know that the majority of those folks are actually working already, so that there's a huge opportunity here. So how do we bring together that opportunity of having them at work and getting them sort of some more skills and some more credentials? A good example of an institution that's doing this in a really innovative way is the Southern New Hampshire University's College for America, and I think it's a model that we'd like to see a lot more of. This is a program, it's a competency-based associate degree program that folks take. I'm just going to call it College for America, partners with employers. And the employers pay the tuition of their students, of their employees, and so the students are incumbent workers, right? And those students earn a Associate of Arts degree. Now, historically, it has always been difficult to get employers to pay for the development of very general skills. What this program has figured out is how to sell, how to make the case to employers that getting their employees these sort of general skills, good writing skills, critical thinking skills, good communication skills, basic math skills, is really going to help their bottom line. And College for America has successfully signed up some very large employers, including Anthem, Partners Health, Conagra, the city of Memphis, actually. And I think this is just a really exciting model. This is an incumbent worker training model that leads to a general associate's degree that is directly transferable, to a 4-year bachelor degree. That's a rare thing.
And what's the delivery mode on that?
It is an online program, and it is a competency-based program, which means that a student progresses at their own pace as they're able to demonstrate mastery or proficiency in particular areas. Some students in this program take 2 years to get that associate's degree, but some have advanced much more quickly. So it's a really interesting, and it's a great example of using technology, educational technology, well for a population of learners that we might often think won't do well with educational technology. But in fact, this program is having a lot of success, which brings me to a second point, a related point, which is I do think that we need to find ways for the sort of adult education community and in general, training providers that are working more with low-skilled populations to leverage technology better. There are ways to, we sometimes are too shy about, or too worried that technology is going to leave people out, but there's a huge opportunity here, and we need to be sort of exploring how to use it better to help learners. And then the second point I want to make of, where I think we need a lot of work is in this area of credentials, which is just sort of a big general word. But, I think we all know that we are living in a time in which, there are credentials popping up everywhere. We're kind of in a wild west of credentials. You can earn a certificate in just about anything these days, and lots of people are measuring credential attainment. And suddenly we're just very focused on, your badges or your certificates or your certifications or your licenses, and we're just sort of awash in all of these different types of credentials, but we often don't know what they mean, and we don't know what's behind them. Some of them attest to very specific competencies and skills. Some of them just mean that you sat in a classroom for a certain amount of time. Employers don't know what they mean. Students don't know what they mean. For a one-stop center or an adult education provider that needs to think about what kind of credential they want to help their students earn or where they're going to point people, they're often flying in the dark and they don't know exactly what this is worth. So I think there's a lot of interest and there's a lot of effort underway right now to start kind of rationalizing and better understanding this world of credentials so that we can really know what the quality credential is, what it's worth. And I think we have a lot of work to do there. And I think when we have better credentials that sort of really signal skills and ability effectively, it will make building career pathways even easier.
Thank you very much, Mary Alice, for your insights on the various pieces of legislation and forthcoming policy issues.
Thanks for listening today. We hope you'll tune in to all 4 of the podcasts in the Moving Pathways Forward series, accessible from the Links Ed, LINCS-ED YouTube channel. For more resources on career pathways, as well as news about upcoming events, join us as a subscriber in the Career Pathways Exchange, a weekly email digest of the Moving Pathways Forward project.